Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to another session of my seminar, and today I'll be talking about interest rate, how interest rate affects Singapore property market. Okay, and today I'll be actually covering into three segments. So this is what I've done for my research. Firstly, I will be talking about the textbook answers. Okay, what are the factors that is actually affecting interest rate and which will leads on to the property market. And secondly, I'll be also talking about how the local interest rate has actually affect Singapore market in terms of the pricing and in terms of transaction volume. So let's move on to it. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to this channel on YouTube and click on the alert notification. So actually in the textbook there's actually a few examples of how what are the things that affect interest rate. Now you must understand that firstly Singapore interest rate is actually heavily depending on the US Fed, okay, the US Federation Bank, okay, and there's this guy called Jerome Powell actually who control the interest rate, and he control the interest rate is because it's to curb inflation. So one thing very good right now is that if you enter into 2023 at time and you look into interest rate at the time, the inflation for US actually is very curbed. That's why a lot of banks right now are actually predicting interest rate to drop in 2024 onwards. Okay, so what are some of the examples? So what actually will cause in how interest rate will affect the property market? So firstly, we look at mortgage affordability. So basically, when interest rate is high that time, the mortgage will be higher, and because the mortgage is higher, they will not be able to afford so much or take so much of a loan amount. Therefore, people will actually buy either cheaper properties or actually will not enter in the property market at all. However, right now in 2024, where we expect interest rate actually were to drop, and when interest rate were to drop that time, people will be able to afford bigger homes or more expensive homes, therefore which will also cause the property market to go up. Okay. Now the second thing we are looking at is actually investor behavior. Okay, so basically now that let's say if you are investor at a time, will you want to park your money into property? Likely it's not. So that's exactly what we saw in 2023, or this is what I saw in 2023. I actually have less numbers of investors, and I have actually more home buyers who are buying property for 2023. Okay, and so when interest rate is high that time, investors will not want to buy into property market because maybe the rent will not be able to cover the mortgage, or they have to come up with a very huge sum of money to pay your mortgage. Therefore, the investors will actually turn into other segments, investment tools, okay, like the S&P 500 or maybe treasury bonds. Okay. Now the next one we will be also talking about will be the housing market activity. So this is actually related to the first two segments. So when interest rate is high that time, we don't expect people to actually buy properties. And because when people don't buy property at that time, right, so the housing market will become very muted. When the housing market become very muted, it means that it has very low transaction volume, and actually prices will actually remain pretty flat. Okay, so the people will not want to either buy or sell the property. Of course, lastly, we also talk about speculations, okay? So I feel that speculation is not something that is actually very significant or applicable to Singapore context. It's because that in Singapore, we have something called the seller's stamp duty. So which means is that if you sell your property within 3 years, okay, you may be taxed up to 12%. Therefore, the government actually has curbed all speculation. So the minimum holding period that Singaporeans will want is actually 3 years. So I don't think it's something that is actually affecting interest rate at all for Singapore context. Lastly, we also look at the economic conditions. Now, though Singapore economic conditions has actually been pretty muted, okay, we have a very small amount of growth. Singapore income is still increasing. Alright, this is actually the current sentiments right now. However, there's a lot of job security fears, and because of this type of job security fears, people are scared of losing their jobs. Therefore, they are very worried that due to the high interest rate environment or the high inflation or even the increase of the GST, people are not willing to invest into property so much. So this is some of the textbook answers of how all these conditions or how interest rate will affect all these conditions. But let me go on to our step number 2, okay, or part 2 of our video, which I'll be actually talking about how interest rate affect Singapore property prices. So now I actually have this chart that shows how the correlationship between interest rate and the property price Okay, now you can see that clearly is that during the 2008 that time, when during the Lehman Brothers crisis, of course, when the interest rate start to drop very low that time, right? Okay, is to spur economic growth. Okay, and because it meant to spur economic growth, you can see that property price within the 5 years period, right, from 2008 to maybe 2014 that time, property price actually grew up by 86%. So what I can say is that during low interest rate environment that time, prices actually shoot up. Okay, and then after that, if you look at during the COVID pandemic that time, right, where interest rate is also low that time, that was when we had our last recession, or really the worldwide recession. Because of with the low interest rate, it helps to spur market activities. That's why the property price grew by 54%. So these are the two major areas in which property price actually shoot up. However, but let's look a bit more in details, okay? Now, when I have to study every segments that time, let me read up to you, okay? That when I look at it, I feel that there's no significant relationship between interest rate and property price. So for example, in 2004 to 2006 that time, with an increasing interest rate, there's an increase of pricing. 2007, highest interest rate of 6%, prices eventually reached the all-time high, okay? In 2008, with a decreasing interest rate, there's falling property prices. And from 2009 to 2016 that time, right, there's low interest rate that just now what I was talking about. Low interest rate, property price increased by 86% because it helps boost the economy, okay? From 2017 to 2019, although there's increasing interest rate, property price is also increasing. 2019 to 2020, okay, decreasing interest rate, property price also increased. 2021 to 2020 to 2021, although there's a low interest rate, price is also increasing. And 2023 to last year, 2022 to 2023 last year, although there's an increasing interest rate, there's also an increasing pricing. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that basically in Singapore, the property price continuously increase. So is there really a correlationship between interest rate and property price or not? Yes, actually there is. But if we look at the overall picture, we also have to look at other factors. So other factors also look at the demand for property and also the supply. So right now, we are actually 5.5 million population. Our white paper says that by 2030, we want to hit 6.9 million population. So definitely for right now, there is still a very huge demand for property. Okay, so that is the first thing. Okay, high demand. So that is why I still believe for the next 10 years, property price will still continue to go up. Okay, maybe it may not be as fast as during the COVID period, where in 1 year the property price went up by 11%, but I still look at it by property price to go up by between 3 to 5%. Okay, now the second thing to look at is actually more important is actually government initiatives. So in my past video, or I will link the article to you in the description below. Now in this article, I did talk about that I saw a very close relationship between government policies and property price. So what I'm trying to say over here is that there's so many factors to consider, but interest rate is only one of smaller factor. The big major factor is still government policies. When the prices go too high up that time, okay, government will come in with a cooling measure. This will cause the price to go down. And when the price go down too low that time, government will ease the cooling measure to help people buy property, and then this will bring the price up. Okay, so that is actually the main thing I would like to highlight to you. Okay, so don't be so overly concerned about interest rate and property price. But more importantly, now this is my third part. How interest rate affect transaction volume. Now, this is my data that you can see from here is that from this graph itself, there is a very, very close relationship between transaction volume and interest rate. When interest rate is high that time, people will not want to buy property, therefore transaction volume becomes very low. But when interest rate is very low that time, there is a very people tend to want to buy property. So this will actually attract both investors and also home upgraders. Therefore, people will buy properties when interest rate is actually low. So this is actually something I would just want to highlight to you. So what does this mean overall for 2024? Now, in my opinion, I feel that right now in 2024, interest rate we are expected to drop. Okay, which means there will be an increase in number of home buyers. Okay, but then again, I don't feel that property price will go drop too low. I still feel that it will be increased on average. Okay, and average I mean is the property price will actually go up by 3 to 5%. Okay, so since now when interest rate is dropping at the time, transaction volume is very high that time, I would actually recommend my homeowners, okay, now, or investors, this is actually now the best time to sell your property because we have actually reached the peak. Okay, so now this is just my personal take. Okay, so that is my take on the interest rate in Singapore context. Okay, I hope you learned something from this. Now, if you like this video, please give a thumbs up button and do subscribe to us. And if you have any comments to share or if you have any questions, just feel free to put in the comment section below. Thank you so long and see you in the next video. Bye.